Welcome again. Thank you for being here. I'm Paul Clyde. I'm the president of the William Davidson Institute. And tonight we have the Ralph J. Gerson Distinguished Lecturer. We are also celebrating our 30th anniversary as an institute. The institute was set up in 1992 at a time when a lot of countries around the world were just beginning to explore the benefits of a private sector operating in a competitive market. And Bill Davidson set us up with the mission to equip economic decision makers in emerging countries with the tools of commercial success. That mission continues to drive us today. And it's easy to get lost in a lot of the bad news that you hear in the world, but I think it's worth reflecting on the past 30 years and the progress that's been made, and it's really significant. Over the past 30 years, the real income per capita globally has gone up by over 60%. And that's not just in the wealthy countries. The number of countries that are in the low income category by the World Bank standards has almost halved. And the number of countries that are in the high income standard has more than doubled from 39 to 81. So we've seen significant progress on that, and it's not just in the wealthiest individuals in those countries. The World Bank calculates a percentage of poverty, and their lowest percentage calculation in 1992, 36.5% of the population was living at that poverty level. In 2019, the last year which it was calculated by them, it was down to 8.4%. It's been extraordinary advances that are made. The world has never seen this before. And business has played a central role in that, in the development of businesses, which create a lot of job opportunities out there. Tonight we have the Ralph J. Gerson Distinguished Lecturer, which was established 5 years ago at our 25th anniversary to honor our board member, Ralph J. Gerson, who is here with us tonight. He has had a distinguished public and private sector career and has been with the Institute since its founding. He was involved in the development of the thinking of it at the very beginning and has been a board member ever since, and is a board member with us today and continues to guide it, and we're grateful that he does and that he's here with us tonight. Tonight we have as our speaker Magatte Wade, and it's hard for me to think of a better ambassador for the mission of and the vision of the Institute, which is the power of business to deliver on economic growth and social freedom. She has a distinguished speaking career, and she's on a lot of videos. You'll see her out there. She has hundreds of thousands of views on them. She's also been recognized by Fortune magazine and by the Global Economic Forum at Davos. One of her videos at TED Talk has had 650,000 views. And so the message you're going to hear from her, she's a tireless supporter of individuals and their ability to create economic value when given the opportunity to do so. So tonight I'm very honored that she chose to speak with us, and thank you for being here. Magatte Wade.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to pause for a moment and honor the memory of Mr. Bill Davidson, and then move on to Erica and Ralph Gerson for what they continue to do for this organization. So thank you. Without you, this wouldn't be here. And of course, the whole staff, you guys, Paul, Claire, these are the few I got to meet today, and Gretchen, I mean, you guys are everywhere, Amy, you and everybody. I mean, I've just been so impressed by who you are, what you do, given what I have come to learn and came to share with you. When I discovered the DWI, I was just like, where have you been my whole life? Right? Maybe I should have started with you. And things might have been a little bit easier and faster. I believe that. So know that you have a great supporter in me now. And you said it, I go many places. And so they will be hearing about you guys. That's it. So my name is Magatte Wade. I was born in Senegal, the west coast of Africa. And what I'm going to share with you is just that, my story. You do with it what you want, because as somebody who believes in freedom, I just tell you what I can share with you, and then from there you take it. So I was born in Senegal, like I said, and after when I got to age 2, my mom was done breastfeeding me, and then my mom and my dad did what so many African parents, especially back in the days, do. They decide to emigrate. So these are economic migrants. They at some point decide that they believe that they can do more than what they're afforded somehow to do or not in their country, and they sail off. These are probably among some of your greatest entrepreneurs, because who are the people who say, I am not going to settle for the status quo? These are people who are saying, no, I'm not going to settle for the status quo, and I am going to go, damn it, and search for a better life. That's what I think everybody in this room who is not Native American has done. You came from another place to this place to build a better life. And so my parents did just that, and they left me behind with my grandma, and grandma was amazing. I was raised by my grandma, and I like to say I was really a free ranch child. I decided that I didn't want to go to school. Grandma said, you don't have to go to school. I said, oh, this is awesome. So I didn't go to school. But eventually, later, around age 7, my parents called for me to go and be reunited with them. By then, their immigration journey has worked. They were in a stable position now, and time has come for me to join them. And so that's when I had the first trauma of my life, leaving my grandma behind. I'm like, what do you mean grandma is not coming with me? No, she's not. What do you mean? And so never will forget how I literally was clinging onto her skirt to not go. That's the only thing I remembered from that trip. Imagine, this was the first time I had to leave. I left my village, left my country, left my continent, and all I remembered was separation from grandma. So that was quite traumatic. To end up in Germany in the middle of the winter. Here I was, African girl, I didn't know what the cold weather was, let alone snow. It's like, are you kidding me? So I remember one day, the firefighters having to come and rescue me because I had just frozen, just like this. I was like this, my little gloves, and not moving anymore. I couldn't make one more step because whatever, the snow was up to here. Anyway, so those are some of the things I remember. And behind my back, my parents had popped 2 more children who were telling me that I was related to them. And I'm like, where did you come from? So, it was just all of that. But most importantly, when I set foot on that soil, on this continent, it was brand new for me. I remember that the first question that popped into my little girl's head was, how come they have this and we don't? And I was just talking about just my experience of even taking a shower. Because back home, taking a shower meant grandma had to get her little charcoal stove, put the coals in there, get them going. You know how long it takes for those of you who do barbecue here. The coal takes a long time. And she didn't have that little chimney we have now to cheat, right, on how long it takes. But so get the coals going, put a pot of water on top, get it to boil, put it in a bigger bucket, put some cold water to it. Then one of my cousins or my aunts or uncles would, because stronger, drag it to the shower. And there, finally, I can set out to take my shower with a little pot, take it out, put it on, and all of that, and that's how I took my shower. Here in Germany, my mom is like, Magatte, time for your shower. I'm like, I am not getting butt naked in this cold. Where is the bucket? And she's like, oh, come on, you silly, just jump in the shower. And there I go in the shower, turn the knobs, the water is coming, temperature I want. It all happened in a few seconds. I'm like, are you kidding me? And then it was just like, how come they have this and we don't? Same thing with, paved roads everywhere back home. Anytime I come home, I have to wash my feet. I mean, what I was talking about is life just felt so easy. I didn't have to spend all this time on things that, it just felt so easy. So that question stayed with me because you know how sometimes kids can be very obsessed with something? And the more you tell them to let it go, the more they're like, no, I need to know. That was me. And so that became, I like to say, the defining question of my life, the reason why I'm even here talking to you. And the question as I was growing up became, how come some countries like mine and so many more in Africa are poor, while other nations like the US, Switzerland, Japan, Australia, New Zealand are rich? Why? And along the way of trying to get my answer to that question, I've heard it all. Some would say, darling, it's not your fault, you see, because, blacks and browns simply don't have the same IQ. That stuff is still out there. I have gone to conferences where some of the panels were flat out talking about the IQ theory. It is still out there. I have heard some people say, oh, it's just because you don't have access to enough education. I say, you go say that to the half of millions of graduates coming out of African universities every single year and can't find a job. And you go say that to some of the Eswatini, ex-Swaziland people I hired today for my company remotely, who are BS in math, PhD in math, and before working for me, they were in Swaziland, and I asked them, what do you do now? Oh, I'm raising chickens. You go tell these people, but they just need more education. So, and others, you're just, malnourished. And others, you don't have access to clean water. And others, oh, it's because I've heard it all. You guys are fighting each other all the time. One day I was even giving a talk at UC Berkeley, and I had this one girl, pretty much she was making the case that maybe the colonizers should never have left, because we just don't have our act together. So the crap that I have to hear on this journey, you cannot even begin to imagine. It's a miracle I haven't killed anybody yet, because seriously, it's like, really. So, but you see, none of this made sense. Because if any of this was true, then why, explain to me why, my parents, the same people, we're talking about the same people, same background, same everything, the minute they leave and they go to this other place, they get to manifest their greatest potential. And millions of people just like them. So with the Cartesian mind that I have, I'm thinking, okay, what changed in this equation? It's the same people, same background, same everything. The only thing that changed is the place they get to be or not. So I'm starting to think, this has to do with the place that they are in. Now, what is it about that place? So I keep going. My little mind just keeps going. I'm observing life and everything. So while all of this is happening, so we moved to Germany. We were in Germany. Then my family decided to move to France. So I was primarily raised in France. And after business school in France, I decided that France was going to be too small for my ambitions. For any of you who know how the French work, it's like, it all depends on which type of schools you have gone to, and then from there, you get to be in this company, and then depending on how many asses you kiss for how long, then maybe you can, climb up, and I'm like, this is not for me, I need to get out of here. So at that point, I decided to come to the US because it was the one place in the world that I was hearing everybody talk about the American dream. In America, you can become anything you want. And I was like, that sounds good. So I came to the US, and there, my first meaningful job, roughly 9 months after getting here, was working in Silicon Valley as a headhunter in finance, and I was working for companies like Google when it was like one tiny office in the Bay Area, working with companies like Netflix when it was a tiny office somewhere in San Jose. I got lost getting there so often because it was so tiny in the middle of nowhere. No one knew that any of these companies would become household name brands. But there in Silicon Valley, I got to discover the magic of entrepreneurship, really feel it, see it. It sounds very cliche, like people starting a business in the back of a napkin, they get together, they talk, and it's all happening. And it was just fascinating and so magical. And I was doing really well for myself. By the time I was, I think, 22 or 23, 20, I was not 25 yet, but I had bought my first home in one of the most expensive zip codes in America, with a pool in California, in Los Altos Hills. Stanford is my background. Wow, little girl from Africa was able to do that. And this was after what my parents were able to do themselves. But you see, with all of that success, oftentimes so this one day, I was driving down, going down Big Sur to Big Sur on Highway 1. In my mind, one of the most beautiful places in the world. Highway 1 is, Big Sur especially. And it was one of these moments where I was so proud of myself for how far I've come. My grandma was dead by then, but just feeling her, she must be so proud of me. She always told me I could do it. And and my parents' sacrifice was definitely had paid off. But eventually that day, something bizarre, something happened that always happens when I start to feel good about myself. It always goes on for 9-10 minutes or so, but then all of a sudden, everything goes dark in my brain. And what happens then, it's been happening almost since I grew a conscience. And, I just turned like dark. And it was not about being a bipolar or anything like that. It's just because at that precise moment of being so happy, my mind goes to those who stayed back home. And my mind goes to the stories that I grew up with as a child and that I would hear almost every other couple weeks, the same story of Senegalese people who pack themselves into little fishermen's boats trying to make it to Europe to get a job. The boat tips over somewhere on the ocean because it's not designed for this type of rough waters, and then they end up at the bottom of the ocean serving as fish food. And sometimes somewhere above, a plane, somewhere above England, a body drops because somebody thought it was a good idea to hide into the landing gear of a plane so that they could migrate to Europe to get a job. Or sometimes they open the cargo section of a plane and there you have a frozen dead body because no one told them that once it gets up there, it gets so cold, they're gonna die. But this person was going to look for a job. And then they say, oh, well, if sea route is so dangerous, let me take land route. And then most of the time when they take land route, so many of them get caught in Libya. And you know what happens to you when you get caught in Libya? Well, you're sold on a slave market. So it took for CNN to talk about it, for the world to know what we knew. Because I happen to be part of WhatsApp groups where on a regular basis, we're being asked to help buy the freedom back of some Senegalese people. Just like I spend oftentimes so many nights talking to some young women with her child to not get on a boat trying to make it to Europe to get a job because we know more than likely what might happen. I spend sleepless nights doing that. Sometimes I succeed for 2 years, 3 years. The person, is patient, but then eventually, one day I hear, we think so-and-so was on that boat because the last time we saw them, they were leaving, and they told so-and-so, and now we know that, yeah. So this has been the story of my life growing up. I tell people I am haunted. So that day, happened something that, I don't know what happened, but usually when my brain would flip like that, I had developed a way to cope with it, and the way I coped with it was literally put it under the rug. Not my problem. What can I do? There's nothing I can do. So that's it. You put it under the rug. But that day, I could not. Couldn't. They say, your mind can almost justify anything, even the worst of the worst, but your body can't. And I think that day, that's what happened. My mind was working to deny everything, but then my body just jerked. And the steering wheel, it's a miracle, I say to people, that I'm here talking to you because I almost ended up down in the ocean below. But somehow, it didn't happen. I stopped the car as soon as I could. I was just like shaken up. I got out of the car, I faced the ocean, and I made a deal with God. I said, God, from here on, every single breath that I take, I want it to be towards the betterment of this continent of mine. That's it. You show me the way because I don't know what to do. But I'm here. I'm reporting for action. And sure enough, a few months later, I'm going to Africa with my then French husband. And Emmanuel, God bless his soul, had worked so hard to try to get me back to working with my continent. But eventually, he would die when I started my first business. But anyway, so we went and I was showing him the hibiscus and all of that. And anyway, so the hibiscus drink that I grew up with as a child, I was so excited to show it to him. But, you know, most people were like, oh, if you've made it, you're doing Coca-Cola. Girl, where have you been? I'm like, where have you been? And so at that point, you know, women are leaving the countryside to go to the cities to find better jobs because now what they grow, we don't need anymore because Coca-Cola had made sure, Fanta and Pepsi had made sure we drink other stuff. And so this was being squeezed out. So anyway, I decided at some point, this anger, I was so angry and disappointed in my own people because on one hand, I have my people dying, looking for work, and I have my culture dying because we don't think anything that's indigenous to us is good enough. And so, you know, but at some point I'm like, anger is energy, it's negative. Turn it into inspiration when it becomes positive. Use it to fuel yourself and move forward. Criticize by creating. The only valid form of criticizing, my father would say to me, is to create an alternative. It doesn't have to be a right alternative, but I just want to know that you're in alternative mode. Because when you're in a solutions mode, it's a whole different mindset. And that's where solutions actually really come from. So my father always said, don't come to me with your problems. Make sure that if you're going to come to me with one problem, that you have at least one solution that you're going to offer me. Otherwise, I don't want to hear it. Go back until you get it. So that's how we were raised. So there, yeah, criticize by creating. I've got a problem with this. Start a company. Bring this beverage back. And put these women back to work. So when the UNDP did a case study on us, by that time we had put 4,000 women back to work. Later we'd grow to 9,000 women. And back in the US, I had raised $32.5 million of funding to get my company going. Eventually, at some point, Pepsi showed up, knocked on the door. And that was pretty much towards the end for me because now I'm like, okay, the professional managers have showed up, I'm out of here. So I left and I'm like, then started another company. But what you have to see through the process, that's when my answer was starting to come. Because that first company, when I started it, was in 2004. I really started to think about it in 2003. But 2004 is when we legalized the business. You know, now I'm going to go in business. And at that time, what am I discovering? Okay, in America, I could start a business in 20 minutes or less, going to the website of the Secretary of State of my state, and within 20 minutes or so, faster, depending on how fast you type, everything is settled and done. You pay a couple $100, some state maybe $300, but that's it. You're done. That was a sister company in the US doing sales and research and development and all of that good stuff. Then the sister company in Senegal doing the supply chain, you know, there, it took me almost 2 years to register the business legally, thousands of dollars in fees, bank account opening, forget it. Over here, if I want to enter into contract with Amy over here, Amy, hi. Okay, we need somebody to work in the lab, and this is going to be the pay we have. Amy's like, this sounds great, wonderful. We signed the contracts, she's good to go. Over here, I'm trying to do the same thing with Erica. Erica, hey, good, let's work together. Erica's like, yeah, I'm excited about this, let's go. Okay, so Erica, because you have a PhD in German, that's worthless to me, but it is a PhD in German, and the state said, every single job is into a convention, it's into a grid, basically. And the way they decide how much Erica is going to make is based on her degree, even if it's worthless to the job in question, all of that. So all of a sudden, I have Erica, who might cost me 10 times more than Amy over there, simply because of this worthless degree of hers that she has, doesn't bother. So most of the time, I would say, Erica, go home. I can't hire you. That's why you have half of these graduates from all of these universities who can't find a job. Because the minute I want to hire them, the state is forcing me to pay them a certain level of money that is not justified business-wise. But let's say I even say, okay, Erica, really, you're worth it to me, we're going to do it. Fine. I sign, she signs. Then I have to go, because we work in the countryside. Remember, I'm trying to give jobs to people in the countryside. Otherwise, they have to leave the countryside, and we have this rural exodus that I'm trying to stop. So what I'm trying to do is build businesses and schools, because those are anchors to build the community. So I have to be in the countryside on purpose, which means, though, that because now she signed, I signed, but the law says, now you have to go to l'inspection du travail, the labor inspection office, a government office. And of course, government offices are not in the countryside. They're like at the regional level, or they're like at the capital city. So we walk over there. I go there. It takes me 3 hours to get there because bad roads and everything. Once we get there, guess what they say? In this case, they're like, well, where is Erica's medical certificate? I'm like, what do you mean? And my CPA didn't tell me this because you have to hire this expert to help you with this stuff. And I call my CPA and I'm like, they want us to bring Erica's medical certificate. So the guy talks to him, and by the way, we had to wait 3 hours for the guy to come back from running his errands at the bank and only God knows where. So he comes back finally, and my CPA talks to him and is like, well, yeah, it's part of a law. My CPA is like, I've never seen this before. I operate in Dakar, the capital city, most of the time. I've never seen it before. He's like, yeah, it's just because over there, they're too busy. They don't have time to request that. But here, we have time, and we're going to make you feel it. And so there it is. Then I go back. I wasted my whole day. I go back. And Erica, please, I need your health certificate. So she goes to the doctor. It's just a bribe. She pays. The doctor doesn't even look at her, nothing. It's rent seeking. So when she comes back with her certificate, she brings it back, and then I have to give it to this, I go back again, and I give it to the inspection labor guy. And then he's like, because he gets to determine if Erica is physically apt to do the job that she, as a grown woman, has decided she wants to do with me. So we have no freedom of contract. I tomorrow want to stop the company. Erica could go and sue me to the state and say, well, Magatte closed her company, and we believe she had no right to do so. So then I have to go again, labor inspection. That's the first step. If we can settle there, then we go to the labor, labor court. Imagine. And so at some point the state says, fine, you can close, but you need to pay Erica this, I don't know how you call it in English. It's only my fourth language, but you have to pay Erica this these damages, because if you hadn't closed, she would have made this X amount of money. Insane. And it's at all levels, all levels. I try to get the electricity coming. It's a nationalized company, the electricity company. I go there, I pay for it. Normally, supposedly on paper, it's 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, we still see nothing. We have paid. A month later, nothing. 2 months later, now I'm like, okay, my assistant, you need to go and see what's going on. She keeps going for 1 more month. Finally, I'm like, I need to go. I go. The guy shows me, it's like, lady, you see that pile over there? It's this pile this high. And it's like, each one of these papers is one application. And for us to do one application, we need meters. How many meters do you see there? So I'm seeing hundreds here of application. I see 3 meters over here. Now I'm like, I'm in deep trouble. In the meantime, I have pre-sold some of my products in the US. I'm running out of time. So I don't bribe him because I'm against bribing, but I explained to this man. I won't take you through what I explained. But eventually he's like, if I don't give this woman a meter, I am dead. So he gives me the darn meter, and then he's like, but you're gonna have to call your own consultant because all of ours are busy. Something I paid for. So they have a side business with some electricians that they gave, and they say, you have to use people that we have given a seal to, again, rent seeking. And so I go to this person and I say, fine, now we have a meter, you can come install it. We go there, we install it, we go there, and he said, well, the cable is so long, we need a special truck to put in the back, we don't have it. This guy shows up with nothing, has no material. I call the mayor of a city and I say, Mayor, I need help, please. And he's like, okay, take the pickup truck of a city hall and just do it. We bring that over there and they say, oh, now we need that big tall ladder. I'm like, where am I gonna find a ladder? So again, I call the mayor, and finally we use a ladder and we get the electricity finally done. In the meantime, I'm gone to run another errand. By the time I come back, the truck is gone, the ladder is gone, because the guy used it to go do some other businesses for himself. I was like, are you kidding me? So anyway, so ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, if you're gonna do business, do you think that you're going to do business in this country I just described, or the one where it takes 20 minutes, takes $200, and you're in business and everything is, I signed my contract with Amy right away, or do you go and do business over here with the way I have to do it with Erica? Who chooses this one? No one. And this, my friends, is what I found about my answer. At the end of the day, you're poor because you have no money, at least not enough money to take care of your primary needs. You have no money because you have no source of income. What is a source of income for most of us? It's the jobs. Where do jobs come from? The private sector, right? And so businesses, don't even think that we should make it easy for businesses to be born and thrive. I think so. But then you find out that everything I went through, actually very serious economic indexes measure this. The Doing Business Index of the World Bank measures how hard or easy it is to start a business anywhere in the world. And it shows exactly what I went through in Africa. And it shows you that it is harder to do business in almost anywhere in Sub-Saharan Africa, except for 6 countries, than it is anywhere in Scandinavia, per se. Because, anti-business people love to use Scandinavia. So I tell them, did you know that Scandinavia is more capitalist than almost any African? The Scandinavian nations are more capitalist than most African nations. So basically, when you take all of this stuff that these indexes measure and show exactly what I'm going through, what they're talking about is something that the economists call economic freedom. How free or not is one to enterprise somewhere? And that what we found is the reason why Africa is the poorest region in the world, it's because it happens to be the most over-regulated region in the world. The reason why Africa is the poorest region in the world, it's because that's a region in the world that provides the least economic freedom to its entrepreneurs. And that answer, my friends, made sense. When I discovered that, and I was living it at the same time and then I started reading, comparing notes, and my God, what I thought, because when I was going through this, I thought, of course we're poor because, of course, everything is messed up because we're poor. And of course, in America, everything works so well as an entrepreneur because it's a rich country. But no, it was the other way around. It's because it's so easy to do business in the US that the US is rich. And it's because it's so hard to do business in our countries that our countries are poor. This made complete sense. So this is why now I'm here, because we talked about it. We don't need aid. I think even this conversation around is aid a solution? I feel like it's only in flipping Africa that I go to economic conferences, which I don't go to anymore, where we talk about everything most of the time, except maybe for normal business. And when we talk about business, it's all about the multinational and everything, but no one is focusing on small and medium-sized enterprises. Now, does it mean that we don't have businesses being built in Africa, being super successful? No, we are having really amazing entrepreneurs fighting despite all the odds against them and winning. But I argue that Nigeria, for example, in the past year or so, birthed, was it 3 unicorns at least, if you didn't know about that. But yeah, so people are really, there's stuff is happening. But I argue that we're still swimming through molasses, and whatever we've been able to accomplish, it would be multiplied by 1,000,000 if we had the right business environment. And so this is why I'm here arguing for the case for business. At the end of the day, I believe that business is the greatest force of good. Even Bono, who used to be Mr. Redistribution, came out last week in the New York Times interview, and he said, after all my years of activism, they're asking him to reflect. And Bono said, after all of these years of activism, I used to think that redistribution was the solution, and I now know that it is not true. He said, entrepreneurial capitalism is the only way to build prosperity. He said, I used to live in a world where I didn't like the idea of looking at business people as heroes. But he said, now I have to agree that if you're able to give a good job to someone and respect them, then in my book, you're a hero. That's Bono. We knew he was going this way, but the intellectual integrity it takes and the courage it takes for someone like him to come back and say that he was wrong. So I argue for business. The concept of business is under attack in this country and in many developed nations. That is dangerous for those of us who still yet have to reach middle to high income level nation status. And when I explained all of this that I explained with you tonight to my employees, after I'm building my 3rd company, and after we built our manufacturing lab, we make cosmetics, I explained all of this to my employees, and one of them, her name is Yahara. She was 26 years old back then, never had a job before us. We have women who are 35, 40, never had a job. All they're doing is at home, cooking, cleaning, and for them, they're waiting for a husband. That's the only way they're gonna make it out. And this girl, she started crying after I said everything I said. And then I said, why are you crying? She said, I'm crying because I have to admit to you, I have to confess, that after all of these years of always seeing in magazines, in movies, everywhere I look, they're showing someone like me, the pathetic little African person, and we need help with everything. They're gonna bring us shoes, they give us food, everything. And she said, Magatte, by now I have come to accept that maybe us Africans are inferior. That's what she said. She was honest about it. I was floored. But then she said, but that's not why I'm crying. I said, why are you crying then? And she said, because now I know that it is not true. And when she said that, I wish you were there to see her body language. Because people say words, but then there's a body language. Her body language, for the whole time I've known her, she was always like this. And then there she was like, all of a sudden like this, you know, shoulders back, straight head. She's magnificent, that girl. She's just so beautiful. Look at me, and I just knew her too, in her brain, real liberation just happened, just like it did for me when I discovered this. So at the end of the day, these ideas, the fact that business is the solution, and that for that, you need a minimum threshold level of free market and free enterprise, that to me is of the greatest moral urgency for people to understand. Why? Because it means literally the difference between life and death. All the people dying right now would not have to die if my country was prosperous right now. So life and death. We also know war and peace. When two nations have business with one another, they usually will think twice before going to war with one another. That's one of my hopes between the US and China. Now that they are, if one goes down, the other one might have to. So people think twice. I'm not saying it's not gonna happen, but there's some buffers. And ultimately, it also means the difference between walking around feeling like less than and feeling dignity. Dignity of a human, which to me is the ultimate. And so to see and to hear people trash business, I just won't have it. I just won't. And that's why I'm so happy and thankful for the work you guys do at DWI. And Ralph, you and Bill, I know you were like this when you were creating this. For you to have that insight when it was not the common insight to have, especially when you guys, did it, because to this day, so I see you as allies. And I want to thank you for putting your foot in the ground and doing what you do. And I hope many more who support entrepreneurship and speak on behalf of entrepreneurship also join on the practitioner's journey that you guys have established. So I want to thank you. And one more thing is to see how, Paul, I don't even know how Paul found me, but I'm like, how did I not know about him? The humility of this team, whether it's Amy, all the people I met, the humility of these people, it's rather mind-boggling. And so, and then Paul says, I really don't care. I really don't need to be in the front. I would be very happy no one ever knowing about me. And then I say, Paul, it's not about people knowing about you. It's about the fact, we know that great things happen when people don't care who gets credit for it. I get that. But here it's all about emulation, right? I would like to see so many more would love to do what you guys are doing. They just don't know how to do it. So for me, it's about building like a cohort of, centers doing what you do. So I will leave you with that. To me, it's a no-brainer. And I want to thank everybody who supports these ideas, especially in these crazy times where business has a bad rap. I happen to be a conscious capitalist. We believe that, I believe in purpose maximization, but in order to do the greatest purpose, you need profit. The relationship between profit and purpose is just blood and you as a human being. If I ask Amy, what is your goal in this world? Amy's not going to tell me, it's to produce as many red blood cells as I can. Well, she's going to be like, I want to save the world. But if she doesn't produce those red blood cells, she's not alive to do that. That's all it is. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Magatte. We have a few questions from our audience, if you have time. First one is, what are ways we can help entrepreneurship flourish in undeveloped countries? In particular, can you comment on the role of philanthropy and social enterprises?
Yeah, so my whole thing these days is promoting this concept of Care 3.0. Those who wanted to support Africa for the longest time, they thought Care 1.0 was aid and charity. Don't take me wrong. If we have a humanitarian crisis, we all gotta go in there and support and help. That's never a question. But when it becomes a way of life, as a friend of mine would say, we've got a problem. So aid and charity, we know, is simply not the answer. You're creating a culture of dependency, and economies simply don't grow that way. Like a friend of mine would say, if you know any country that has thrived on aid, please come back and report. And then people are like, okay, that doesn't work. Okay, what's the next, can we elevate ourselves a little bit? So then they went to what I call Care 2.0. Now we're talking about social entrepreneurship, primarily, described as what Tom Shoes was doing with this whole buy one, give one. So you buy one pair of shoes, we give one pair of shoes to a child in need somewhere around the world, and usually these are poor places. Well, where we manufacture in Senegal, we have 215 small mom and pop businesses making shoes. Each one of them hiring 15 to 20 people. Do you know what happens to these people when the day the truck full of your free Tom shoes shows up? What do you think happens to these businesses? They go out of business. That's what you've contributed to do. I know it started with good intentions, but as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And that's one right there. And then because that model works so well, the whole world started to do it with everything. Now I'm having free tampons, I'm having free soaps, I'm having free shampoos, I mean everything. If you were in the US, we would call this dumping. And so you're literally destroying the little economies we have with your good intentions. So, but the problem is they were still thinking about a solution within the same social fact. That was a problem. And Blake Mikoski, the founder of Tom Shoes, once he found out about all of this, he literally, I think he's still nursing his wounds somewhere in LA, being like, what have I done? So then us, now we realize where people care. You will not stop people from caring, thank God. So then it's up to us to try to find a solution. So what we're putting out to the world now is this concept of Care 3.0. And Care 3.0 is as simple: buy one, give one destroys economies, but buy African products, made in Africa, by Africans, you're supporting good, viable jobs. So that's what we're pushing at now, And that's the products you have on your tables. They're made back home, like I said, and all of our production is sold in the US, primarily Whole Foods Market, as well as some other, retailers like that, and we're working on some other major retailers to work with still. So the goal is, I tell everybody, what's the goal of this lip balm? It's not only, of course, to take care of your lips using amazing African ingredients, but most importantly, I'm out to create jobs. Every time you're getting these lip balms, a few more jobs are going to be created. That's all I care about. So yeah, buy African products made in Africa, by Africans, simple. And so that's what I think of philanthropy. I think philanthropy has its role in very specific circumstances, but when it becomes a way of life, it's just simply not sustainable.
Great, thank you. Second question, tell us where the name Heart of a Cheetah comes from.
So back in 2007, in Arusha, my life changed in terms of finding my answer. And George Ayite, Ghanaian economist, got on stage at TED Global. It was the first TED Global. I'm part of the first cohort of TED Fellows. And we started the whole TED Fellow thing. We started with the African Fellows. And George went on stage and he had this talk called Hippos versus Cheetahs. If you have a chance, watch it. It is epic, epic. I was on the tip of my chair, I was just like, whoa, what I'm feeling inside, you mean like there is a reasoning around it? And George was making this case, it was so amazing, and he was saying, the hippos are these old, bureaucrats, these corrupt leaders sucking the blood from, the whole system. They destroyed Africa, but the cheetahs are the fast runners of Africa. This is the generation, it's all of you here who are not waiting for anybody, you're not gonna wait for anyone, and all my hopes rest on your backs. So run, cheetahs. That's what George said. He became my mentor, and he taught me so much. Because I was like, George, once I understood about economic freedom and its relationship to business and prosperity building, I said, George, how do we get to where we are mostly as a continent? And then George, wow, but man, he had done all of his research. This is a very serious scholar. I worked for Brookings Institute, just very serious scholar. And George said, Magatte, and he took me back, and he said, talk to me about this 5th Pan-African Congress, which would be the last Congress before, the independence is happening in Africa. This one was happening in 1945, and it was happening in England, and he was talking to me about all these people. You had, Blaise Diagne from my country. You had, Nkrumah over there. You had a Nyerere. So all of these liberators of Africa, the people who have been fighting for the liberation of Africa. And it was at a time when, in 1945, very soon, Gandhi was making progress at that point with liberating his country from the colonizer Britain. So here you had the biggest colonized country India, about to get its independence from the biggest colonizer in the world back then, Great Britain. And so you could only imagine the air of freedom that was, the freedom that was in the air. And everybody was so excited, and the Africans were like, whoa, us too, we're gonna get there. So, but during that time, you also have to go back up a little bit and remember what the world was like in terms of ideologies. This is a time at which the free markets ideology had all but died. Someone else that I spent a lot of time with, who used to be the Secretary of Mises, now we're talking about the Hayekians, that whole school of thought, and he said back then, you could put the free market people into a phone booth. That's how, the free market concept almost was dead. Meanwhile, you had, because Stalin, especially after during the Depression, while Americans were suffering, the rest of the world was suffering, he was saying, oh, us, we're doing just fine. That was lies, we know that now. But anyway, so it was a time at which we had these two great ideologies were still fighting with one another, here represented by the West, and they represented supposedly freedom, and the economic model was capitalism. Over here, they were facing off with the East, representing various forms of statism, and they were just clashing with one another, looking for influence down to the global South. And us, having come, having by that time come out of slavery, and then, now we're talking about some of our countries, in 57, Ghana was the first one to get its independence, but around these times, that's what was going on, right? And so our people said, you, the West, colonized us. So whatever it is that you're standing for, certainly we're not gonna go for it. And at that point, they rejected, they said, we're gonna side with the Eastern Bloc, with the Eastern ideology, and at that point, rejected also capitalism, threw the baby out of the bathwater, if you ask me. And that's how most African nations started out, with presidents who were, for the most part, socialist, and when they were not, they were communist. And that has followed us, because we all know that if socialism is what you, go for, economically speaking, you absolutely have nothing to show for. Again, show me a socialist country that is practicing socialism, economically speaking, because then people are going to, what, China? Well, even communist China had to be capitalist. Read how China became capitalist by Coates, the Nobel Prize, who wrote it with Nina Wong, and they explain to you how through these SEZ models, special economic zones, some of the most free market zones in the world, that's how China made the miracle that they did. So even communist China had to finally get its act together and become capitalist to get to what they did. 800 million people out of poverty in such a short amount of time. So George explained all of that to me, and George said, and he spent so much time with me. He even wrote the foreword of the book. So the cheetahs is us. He said, we were his greatest hope. And he wrote on my foreword, he said, Magatte was my dream come true. She's everything that I mean when I talk about a cheetah. We lost George earlier this year, but I continue. Us Africans could not appreciate him enough in his time. It happens oftentimes. Your contemporaries do not get you. But it is my goal for George's name to be in history books for times to come, because he knew before anybody else what we needed to get ahead. And so we are creating the Cheetah generation. It's not a matter of being Africans or not Africans. It's about anyone who believes that Africa actually indeed can leapfrog into the 21st century. I live in a world where Dakar will become the new center for fashion and culture. I live in a world where, Lagos, Nigeria is going to become, I don't even like to say the Silicon Valley of the world, but it's going to be this thing that the world doesn't even know yet what it's meant to be. Tech center, hub. I live in that world where we have completely leapfrogged at every level, where Africans are going to be global co-creators of the world. And that's what the world I live in. And the truth is, for me, this is not utopia. We know how to do this. We do know how to do this. So we're working on policy reforms, because I also wear a hat. I'm the director of the African Center for Prosperity of the Atlas Network. We work on reducing barriers of entry for entrepreneurs in their respective countries. So we invest in free market think tanks who then work with their governments to take down barriers. And at the same time, I'm working right now on my most radical idea, which is this concept of the startup cities, where if the laws is what's preventing us from thriving, then instead of going for piecemeal, while we're going for piecemeal legislation, can we find a piece of land that's rather unoccupied in a country where the president is on board with us, and then there we create a zone with its own law and governance when it comes to business. And we start with a blank canvas. We draw our own laws, and then we see if it works. It's this concept of try before you buy, and we believe that's going to be probably one of the fastest ways we get this done. And the truth is, we signed an MOU with a country like that, and we have other people who are also working on things like this similar in other African nations. So somehow it's going to happen. And you know what keeps me so positive about all of this? We know that whenever a country does the right thing when it comes to a business environment, it takes less than one generation to see the magic. So we will see this in our lifetime if we do this. And all we need, because sometimes my people are like, oh my God, you realize we're 54 countries, 55 depending on how you count. Really, really? And I said, guys, the beauty is we only need one country to show the way. And then the rest is history, because everybody else is going to copy and do more. So this is the world in which I live. And it's going to happen. I've been in this position for a long time. When I started my first company, Adina, that I told you about, all my African friends were laughing at me. Girl, you've gone to these fancy universities and you're doing what? Selling flower juice? And I'm like, and they're laughing at me. And I said, laugh all you want. We'll see who's going to laugh last. Because for them, it was about working for McKinsey, working for, GE or whatever, which is fine. But I would tell them, this is not what's going to advance our continent. Thank you very much. So while you do this, I'm going to go do this. So again, criticize by creating and let the facts speak for themselves. So here again, you will say, Magatte told us. Darn right, I said it to you. So you watch.
All right. I think that's probably a good place for us to stop. So I want to, again, thank Ralph for all his support and welcome our Dean Matusik, who is our new board chair for the Davidson Institute. Thank you for being here. And especially thank you to Magatte. Thanks for the comments this evening.
Thank you.